Well, Pam, which way you going? Left or right?
Right.
That's too bad.
Why?
Well, because it was a 50-50 shot on whether you'd be going left or right. You see, we're both going left. You could have just as easily been going left, too, and if that was the case, it would have been a while before you started getting scared. But since you're going the other way, I'm afraid you're gonna have to start getting scared immediately.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk here.
I just can't take no pleasure in killing. Just some things you gotta do. Death has come to your little town, Sheriff.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
Who's laughing now? Be one of us. Join us! Join us! Join us! Join us! Why don't we just wait here for a little while? See what happens.
Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters, and welcome to another edition of SplatterCast. I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And no, your eyes nor your ears deceive you. That is a new intro. We have spiced some things up here on the podcast. So got a couple of new things going on. We no longer will be basically when we segmented these out. Originally, the idea was to basically take a quote, a title, something, another, a landmark, whatever, from each of the films. And that would be how we segment it out. And we would kind of loosely pull together what we wanted to do. Some things were going to remain the same, like Creatures Features was something that I think transpired in almost all of them that we've done so far. But yeah, we decided to streamline things a little bit more. We now have set topics, which we're going to be releasing a video very soon here, going over our whole format for both of our shows currently. Just something kind of like an intro to the channel for people to get on and see. But yeah, this is the inaugural episode of this. We also have a fun little project or a little side thing going on at the end there for the intro that I did for it as well. So lots of new and improved stuff on this episode, which I'm going to pass things off over to my partner here because this was actually his pick. So Luke, take us away.
Oh, yes. Well, if you clicked on the episode, you already know what we are discussing here. Tremors 2, Aftershocks, which now this film is very near and dear to my heart. And obviously we did lose Mr. Fred Ward. So when that happened, me and Dylan had talked a little bit, and we were kind of saying we should probably do something in his memory, even though it's a little bit later. We kind of stockpiled some episodes, so we didn't get this one right out, but we wanted to put this on the docket to tackle. And this is honestly one of my favorite films in terms of, I guess you'd say, sequels, where sometimes that original is so perfect that sequel doesn't necessarily live up to it. But I think this is such a great companion piece. I think some people don't like it maybe because the original is such a great film, but I think this is a lot of fun. So yeah, we just had to put this one on here because I enjoy it, and I think, Dylan, you have a certain love for it as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, when I was, I can't even think about how old I was for this one. I might have been like between 8 and 10 years old. There was, for some reason, a sale going on at like Walmart or something on a bunch of movies one summer. For some reason, my parents thought that was a big deal. They wanted to go do that. Actually, I think it was Giant Eagle. Again, no idea why. But they really liked it. So we went and we got the Tremors 4-pack on DVD. So
Oh, a four
that's
pack.
yes, because there were only 4 movies at that time. So now there's like what 7 or something like that.
I've lost track.
I've seen them all. I own them all on my Voodoo. So
And
that should tell you a little bit about my feelings about this franchise.
yeah, so we will jump into Tremors 2 here in 1 second. I did want to ask where it all started. I know we will tackle this eventually, so we're not going to get too deep in the woods here. But give me some of your initial thoughts on the original Tremors first, before we
Mhm.
jump into Tremors 2 Aftershocks.
I had probably seen the original Tremors on TV, or they had rented it from Blockbuster at some point. It was always a movie that was playing in my house when it comes to my family and things like that. That was a very popular amongst them and my grandparents, who at the time literally lived next door to us. So with me constantly going back and forth, I would be watching that on Sci-Fi, AMC, whenever it would come on. I just knew that Tremors was one of those classic movies, like an Independence Day or something on of those nature, like Jurassic Park, stuff like that, that my family watched a lot. And like I said, getting that 4 pack years later was big for me, because then that's when I first got exposed to Tremors 2, which
Okay.
was just one of those things where it was like, this is really cool. I like the direction it takes. And, I'm, like I said, maybe 8 or 9 years old. So it's like, I'm not sitting here nitpicking it, things like that, like going through and kind of seeing just like maybe how this could be perceived as kind of silly. But the first one's silly. And in a way, I feel like the comedy is intentional in a lot of this stuff. But, I think that, I actually watched that movie at that age and just was like, no, this is a really solid sequel. This is something that I
Yeah.
like. So I've always had a soft spot for it. I don't remember the third one that much. I know the fourth one is the one where it's a prequel.
Yes.
And
Correct.
Burt Gummer's still in it. So it's like, he's playing an ancestor of his. But like that's interesting. And then we get into the direct to DVD stuff. But I think that I would say I'm a big enough fan of this franchise. You could probably see that we might be covering definitely the first one, but we might be covering the rest of the series at some point, because like I just think that they're fun movies. They're unique.
And I would say I'm pretty much a mega fan of the first two, and then beyond that, there's as we talk right now on this podcast, there's a little bit of a narrative going, a discussion, if you say. I don't know if you've noticed it on Twitter, where it's like, I think I don't know who initially posted it, but it was a tweet that had been shared and discussed pretty frequently over the past few days, where someone had mentioned that like horror and comedy do not mix. It's not a great marriage, and a lot of people are against that. And for me, I kind of stand where, like you're saying, where like the original is a comedy of sorts. Same thing in the vein of An American Werewolf in London, where I feel like there's comedy in it that works, but it's not really a horror comedy, I don't think. And the same thing with Tremors. I don't really see it as a horror comedy. I see it's got comedic moments in it, but it's not like a straight up comedy. And see, it's like where I think Tremors 2 has a certain charm to it. Yeah, and again, I don't find it to be any sort of horror comedy or anything like that. Now, when we get into 3 and we're calling them ass blasters, I feel like this is where we go off the rails with it, and it doesn't work anymore. So I think
I
there's that
remember that
fine
now.
line. So you know, maybe we'll discuss past 2 at some point. I I could say I've seen 3. I've seen the latest one just because I wanted to see where the franchise had gone. And I will say anything past 2, I'm probably not going to be looking forward to discussing. But if it's on the docket, we will talk about it.
I think that I've been very fair with you, and not by throwing a bunch of trash your way. I think we've been watching some good stuff. So you just have to be prepared, because one of these days I'm going to fling in a Megalodon 3 or a Tremors 5. You know what I mean? Which actually, from what I can remember, if that's the first one that Jamie Kennedy's in, it's actually not that bad.
Okay.
So by direct to DVD standards. But yeah, I mean, like, I think, just to touch on that before we get into our before we get the ball rolling here, um, I think that it really just depends on what your definition of a horror comedy is. Because, like, yeah, I would say American Werewolf's a horror comedy. I would also say that Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 and all of the Evil Dead movies are comedies in some form or way. They're evil, like they're horror comedies. I don't think that's a bad term. Like, I don't understand. I feel like that's something that, like, you should be getting major props for if you can, not only scare the shit out of me, but you can make me laugh and enjoy the characters. I always feel like that's why some of these movies, like if you guys are noticing, I'm a massive Evil Dead fan. I'm also a massive American Werewolf fan. And I said both of those are horror comedies. So it's like I think if you can blend that really well, that like that's brilliant. I mean, look at Peter Jackson's early work. From what I understand, I haven't seen any of them just because like I'm talking about like Meet the Feebles and all that stuff, Dead Alive. I want to see them, but they're just so hard to find any
Yeah.
copies of or anything. They're not streaming anywhere, so I'm waiting for those 4Ks to release eventually. But yeah, I mean, like that has been described as a horror comedy as well. So it's like where it's getting this twinge I could see maybe from modern films because like comedy just hasn't worked in things like gotta throw it on the pile as usual here. Halloween 2018, the comedy didn't work for me there. Scream 5 comedy didn't work for me there. It's just like it's this kind of Blumhouse horror, which is ironic because The Black Phone came out and that has a lot of great comedy in it. I thought that all of that was executed beautifully. But like what I'm talking about, the Truth or Dare, stuff like that, the Fantasy Island stuff, like that really poppy, modern, we're doing this horror movie with all these sexy people walking around and this is what we
Yeah.
do. It's like there are no names. It's just that's if that's the horror comedy that they're saying is trash, then that's fine. But if you're talking about this stuff, like then we can just sit here and argue all day.
See, and we may have to do a long form discussion about this down the road because we can probably discuss this for the next hour. Because like where you're saying American Werewolf in London's a horror comedy, I feel like comedy is a marriage in horror where you need those moments of levity. So like American Werewolf in London, I think mixing with the horror. What kind of emotion do you want? You want comedy to kind of lift you up so you can be in place with that horror. Now, I don't think that makes it the definition of a horror comedy. Something like Shaun of the Dead, where it's like, okay, this is comedic in a sense, and it's got a horror element. I could see being like a horror comedy because it owns it, and that's what it's set out to do.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, you need those moments of levity in horror because you can look at almost any horror movie that's not even defined as a horror comedy, but you can look at a straight up horror, and there's going to be comedic moments in it just because that's kind of the equation that is set, where you need those moments of funny times so then you can amplify the horror. So it's like I think those are the ones that work best. Or again, horror comedy like Shaun of the Dead, where it owns it and that's what it's set out to do and that's what it's trying to do, I think works perfect. But sometimes, again, where we go into like how you said Scream or Halloween 2018, that the comedy in there is just not good. So I think there is that fine line where it's like it can give you a moment of levity and prepare you for the next moment of horror, or it can totally deflate it and just take you totally out of the actual film itself. Because I think something like Halloween 2018, that it does that for me, where it's like the comedy's so lame that it just doesn't work for the rest of the film. So I mean, we can unpack that farther. I didn't mean to go down this road so far, but what can you do?
No, I mean, like, it's fair. I think that that's definitely worth talking about in the future here because, like, we seem to have a lot of thoughts. And yeah, I think like if it was ever considered like a garbage or like a something that's like not to be looked upon as as fondly as horror movies that mostly don't have comedy, uh like I just don't understand where the disconnect came from. I
Yeah.
really just don't, because it's just like I think that anything that you would classify as a horror comedy uh is probably more entertaining and has more character depth than you're going to get from just your standard typical uh you know people go out to the woods and get murdered kind of horror
Yeah.
like horror thing.
But
That's just my take on it.
And to bring it around to Tremors, which was the point that when I had mentioned Tremors 3, where it's like Tremors 2 leans a little bit into, I guess you'd say comedy, but not too far into comedy, where it's like, I think it walks that fine line that the first one does. If I just remember watching Tremors 3, and as soon as they said that they were called ass blasters, I was legitimately instantly deflated because I was like, I was so excited for 3. It was a big event. It was on, I think, Spike TV at the time. And I actually waited for it all day because I was such a big fan of Tremors 2. And then I saw what it was, and they called them ass blasters, and I was like, really, this is the route we're going with? Because I knew that there was comedy in Tremors, but it was never like over the top comedy. And as soon as they said that, I instantly checked out. It was just like, this isn't for me. And that's where we kind of we crossed that line, and okay, it's too much comedy for me to ever take this franchise seriously. Where it's like Tremors 2, they're called Shriekers. It's like, oh, if they would have come up with a funny name for them, I feel like it wouldn't have worked. But
it wouldn't have worked as bad.
You kind of have to suspend that disbelief a little bit, and you own it, and you go into that horror element, and they did it, and that's why I love Tremors 2. So like, getting back to my experience with Tremors 2 was, I actually saw Tremors 2 before I saw Tremors.
Oh, wow.
So this was always my film, and this is why I have such a love for this movie. It was on USA all the time. So this was like, it was always on. So I'd always go back to this one. So I had probably seen this one a year or two before I'd actually seen Tremors. So for my experience, I was introduced to Shriekers really more so than Graboids. And then I went back and I watched the original Tremors because I remember it was on TV really late at night one time, and I was like, I watched the second one. Let me watch this one. And I knew Kevin Bacon was in it, and I was like, oh man, this one's great as well. But it's like Tremors 2 for me is probably like, Jaws 2. You know what I mean? Where it's like it's a great companion piece. So I love the original, and Tremors 2 is a great follow up.
All right. Well, I say no time like the present. Why don't we get into it with our first topic here? So let's get an intro here.
The film which you are about to see is an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths, in particular Sally Hardesty and her invalid brother Franklin. It is all the more tragic in that they were young. But had they lived very, very long lives, they could not have expected, nor would they have wished to see as much of the mad and macabre as they were to see that day. For them, an idyllic summer afternoon drive became a nightmare. The events of that day were to lead to the discovery of one of the most bizarre crimes in the annals of American history, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yes, so that brings us into our first segment here, guys. Account of the macabre. So this is basically just where we're going to get into the synopsis of the film, just talking about the story, what this movie is from A, B to C. So if you have not seen Tremors 2, why are you watching this? Like, go check that movie out and then come back here, please, because like this is a lot of fun, and I think that this is definitely worth checking out. And we're going to spoil the crap out of it. So, but if you just don't care and you just want something to listen to, all the respect in the world to you. Thanks for sticking around, Luke.
Thanks for
why
listening
don't you,
to us.
why don't you take us away? Tell us what's going on in Tremors 2 here, man.
All right. Well, years after the first events of Tremors, Earl Bassett, former hero and now a less than successful ostrich farmer, is back in the saddle and ready to blow up some Graboids. Earl is paid $50,000 for each Graboid casualty by the Mexican government. But he's not alone. Taxi driver and local idiot Grady Hoover inserts himself in the mayhem to help Earl. As they arrive to the Mexican oil refinery that is under attack by the giant underground worms, Earl is instantly smitten with geologist Dr. Kate Riley. Realizing they are in over their heads just a bit, Earl calls in reinforcements, and the man, the myth, the legend, yes, Mr. Burt Gummer shows up with all the ammo the Mexican government will give him. As they go on a Graboid killing spree, our heroes realize the game has changed as our underground worms give birth to bipedal above-ground shriekers. The situation gets rather toasty as the gang realizes the shriekers are hunting by body heat instead of the sound this time around. Trying to keep their cool and find a way out of this mess, they trap the shriekers in a giant storage shed. Earl sneaks into the shed after being doused in CO2 to set one of Bert's explosives and makes it out just in time as he begins to melt. They all make a quick dash as the timer hits 0 and blows the shriekers to monster bits and orange goo. This time around, Earl gets the girl as Grady pitches him on a monster theme park with their newfound fortune.
What a
Dylan,
fun story.
it really is. And this is where it's like, there's we'll get into the scripts a little bit later here, but it's like they had a very specific vision for this film. I think they wanted to keep a little bit of that tongue in cheekness, and I think they again, like how we talked about, they walked that line and owned it. And for me, this film turned out perfect. So just like hearing, you had seen the original Tremors, and then knowing what you had known before going into Tremors 2, were you already sold on this film, or were you pretty hesitant, kind of before your first viewing of it?
No, man, I was sold from the moment I knew there were 4 Tremors movies. Like I said, I'd seen the first one so many times before I owned it that when I knew there were 3 other sequels, I'm just like, holy crap, like let's go. Cause like I loved these monsters, these worms. Like I love Kevin Bacon. Like he's one of those people again that just like, having the parents and the relatives that I had, he was an actor that was respected. Everybody liked it. I love the chemistry between Fred Ward and Kevin Bacon in the first film. So the fact that you're telling me that we're at least getting Fred Ward back, and he's going on this whole other adventure with Burt Gummer and all them to hunt more Tremors, like sign me up. I was ready to go. I was like, let's fucking do it. I remember I probably came right home and threw that thing right in. That's probably the first one I watched before I even watched the first one.
Yeah.
Because growing up as a kid, in my time, all these big franchises have all these sequels. So it's like once I get hooked on the first one, all I want to know is like, what else do they do with the story? Like, what else is going on? So like this movie to me, like you said earlier, I could see it in like I'm a big defender of Jaws 2. Okay, like that's just I think that film is underrated. I think it adds a lot to the story. I think that this is a perfect continuation for Tremors. I think it
Yes.
stays in with the tone. I think that all the characters are great. That you get some actual growth and depth between Bert and um, Fred Ward's character and everything. Sorry, I'm running everybody's names through my head. But yeah, like you just get actual development between them, and I actually think Grady's a pretty nice addition. Yeah, he's a little stupid and a little dumb, but he doesn't really annoy you. He does bring up some good points and stuff like that at times, and he is basically just trying to get there to say like, "Hey, I'm a huge fan, and I'm getting to live the dream, going Graboid hunting with one of the original guys that discovered him."
Yeah.
So you could just tell that he's enjoying himself too, and I think that like part of the allure, part of the best part of this movie is just the chemistry between the characters. So when we get to the cast and crew section, like I'll have a lot to say there because like I think that they really bolster this movie up quite a bit for me. And that's something that you get from your first viewing. That's something you can get on your 100th viewing.
And with this one here, we have talked about it. I believe, we did talk about it in our latest Sunday Scaries, where we talk about the potential for a Black Phone sequel. And I know we've talked about it in a lot of our Prey content that's out there and random stuff where we just decide to bring up Prey, where it's
Every
like,
episode.
with a franchise, sometimes directors, producers, studios in general will want to make a sequel just for the hell of it, and it adds nothing to the lore. We're just doing it. We're replaying the greatest hits, and we just want to capitalize on the name value. So Tremors 2 for me, and probably why I love it so much, is it adds something to the story. It really expands the lore in terms of how do you change the game here? You take the Tremors from being subterranean and you move them up onto above ground here. And I think that was such a great play to be like, well, what do we do next here? And for the longest time, I guess I was under the impression, especially when I had first seen it, that this was the evolutionary stage of the graboids. But in my research and reading things, this is actually the shriekers are babies, and they will eventually lose their legs and go underground. And that is a very interesting concept to kind of go with, because it kind of gives you that, I guess, the life cycle of them, where it's like you're uh, being a graboid, you birth the shriekers, and then the shriekers become graboids later on. I think that was such an interesting kind of take on this, and to, I guess, add a nice variety of something completely different. Because again, you don't want to go the Tremors route and replay those greatest hits. Yes, you would love to bring back an original cast, but you want to put them in a different setting. And like just how this goes, where they say the game has changed, it literally has. So I respect this film so much for trying to tell a different story.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, that's 100% one of the best things about great sequels is that they bring back the characters, at least some of them, and they will honor them, but they will also tell a different story, have a different twist. Too many times we see sequels that are basically the same movie, over and over again. Now, I understand that I could be given some shit because Friday the 13th is essentially just the same story over and over and over again. But I love them and I watch them. And, I will admit that a good portion of those suck, just like every other franchise. But, like there are like soft spots in my heart for those movies. I gotta say that, like, I appreciate that this, really does go out there and try to make it different. Like they really give in the first film the humans are at such odds with these worms. Like they don't know what to do, how to handle them. And it's so great to see that, like, what happens now that the world has had to adjust to these creatures for a couple years. Like, what do we see now? Like, now that people know these things exist, how do we handle it? And, just having, Fred Ward's character come in here and just, have this ingenious idea of attaching explosives to RC cars.
Yes.
I mean, that's so fun. Like that's the fun that I'm talking about in this movie. Like it's creative, it's unique, it's a good time. I know we're kind of jumping ahead here. I mean, we're in the synopsis section, so I guess we could talk about the whole movie in general, but
Yeah.
like when Burt Gummer comes back and he uses that method that they taught him, it's just so satisfying to see. I love that moment. And they all have that same recollection of like, maybe this is too many explosives. Maybe I could dial it back a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like this little moments like that make these people real and make them, you know, something enjoyable to like people to get behind, really. Like
Yes.
that's what you get out of this sequel. And that's the best kind of sequel, in my
Hey,
opinion, is just adding more.
and the beats in this one are so perfect because it really plays out like how you would expect a real life scenario to play out, where they want Earl to come back and take on these graboids for round two, and he's absolutely against it. I love that they go the route of, Grady says, I loved you in the Reebok commercial, with Val, and he's got the arcade game in his trailer. And he's like, "Oh, you must have made a fortune on this." And they keep going back to it. And he's like, "Well, someone did, but it wasn't me." Where it's like he was totally taken advantage of. Instead of getting a percentage, he just took a flat rate and, blew it all in the ostrich farm, which again is another fun tongue in cheek thing, I
Oh
think,
yeah.
where they play that for laughs, where you think he's probably taking on a bull or a horse, and it turns out to be a little ostrich. I think that's this film is about having fun. Um, and what I was getting at was like this one where he goes in hesitant, then it's almost like fish in a barrel, where we're attaching explosives to the RC cars, we're blowing them up left and right, no big deal. We call out uh, Bert just to kind of help because there's too many of them, more than they thought there was going to be. But again, it's nothing overwhelming. But then, boom, we change. The game's changed, and now we're dealing with a different aspect of a graboid. Now we have a shrieker, and
Mhm.
we don't know how to deal with these. So it's like at one point they were, looked at as, having the upper hand, and then boom, we change it and they're back where they were in the original Tremors because they don't know what they're dealing with anymore. And
Yeah,
then,
and that's always a smart play. That's always what you want to do. I mean, look at Alien to Aliens. I mean, like you have one alien that was already causing so much trouble and havoc, and then you put it with a team of Marines in the sequel up against, I don't know, like a million aliens, like,
yeah,
and a queen. So it's like, you have to, bring a little something new to it. And I think I'd always appreciate that, especially with my creature features. Like this is very much a creature feature. Showing the evolutionary steps. The thing that I really appreciated on this coming around on this viewing was the discussion of them being Precambrian
yes,
and just really cementing them into the culture of this world and everything, and the history. It just adds a realistic element to it that's just enough to really make me be like, okay, yeah, they're actually trying to ground this a little bit. Let's see some of the evolutionary pattern of these creatures. Let's see what they can do. Like, what do they do when they're not hunting? I mean, like, are they have any bit of intelligence at all? And then they talk about how they reproduce asexually. So it's like there was genuine thought put into this. It's not just, oh, we're gonna have more worms and they're gonna eat people and that's it. And I think that's where I think like you get the best footing for this film, and why I think that it stands and is, I would say, just under the first film for me, as far
yeah,
as like, I love them both. Like you said at the start of this, like I think that they were both. I watched Tremors 1, I'm gonna watch Tremors 2. I watched Tremors 2, I'm gonna watch Tremors 1. Like that's just how it is. Like it's always in my rotation there. The other sequels, yeah, take them or leave them, but these two for sure.
yeah. And see, and like this one here, we can probably jump into production here in a minute, because like this one, Tremors is like, if you're talking about films in the franchise, we're gonna go Tremors. It just is. It's the biggest one. It's the original. They put effort into it. That was the one. Now Tremors 2, honestly, if a lot of the production things that did not happen, and they got what they thought they were going to get, Tremors 2 could have been just as big, if not bigger, than the original Tremors.
Hmm.
Um, so, I mean, I think that'll be a perfect lead into our next little segment here.
Well, let's get into it then.
Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock.
It's almost time, kids. The clock is ticking. Be in front of your TV sets for the Horathon. And remember the big giveaway at 9. Don't miss it. And don't forget to wear your masks. The clock is ticking. It's almost time.
Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock.
I appreciate that so much.
It's gonna be great. I hope we don't get sick of it anytime soon. We could always change them, but like I love that.
Or they snag us for copyright.
Oh yeah, then we might have to change it. We'll see.
Yeah.
That's the other thing about this, is a nice little test run here. So cross our fingers we can get through this and none of our crap has to be
And
re-edited.
side note here, I'm gonna say, Dylan, all the credit in the world for the new intro. That was
Oh,
all
thank you.
Dylan. Perfect. My only critique now is there's no Tom Atkins. So
Mm,
maybe you put in Tom Atkins and Jamie Lee Curtis by the fire from the fog.
okay, I'll find a way to get that in here for you at some point down the road.
There
We
we
could
go.
always revisit the fog. If you are looking at some of our older episodes on Spotify or any of the audio sites, go down and you'll see that we do have a fog episode from
Yeah.
2020. So
That one was a lot of fun to do
it
too.
was good. I would definitely like to revisit it with the new format and everything, and just have to get into some new points and stuff.
Yeah, play those greatest hits.
Yeah, but so this is Behind the Mask. Basically, this is just a look behind the silver veiling here of just production. We want to talk about the history of it, where it came from. Luke loves to dive deep into some of these things we cover, and actually go back and read some of the scripts, look at some of the original ideas. He is our man as far as our guide here when it comes to this section, I would say. But yeah, I think that with a movie, a follow-up to such an effects-heavy film like Tremors, I'm real excited to hear what was going on, what were the ideas, where did they want to go, and how did we end up here with Tremors 2?
Well, okay, so this one really does, and this is, I love Tremors and our Tremors 2 Aftershocks, and it was not until afterward that I had really dove into the production, and I knew of a little bit of things, but I mean, this film really, like, there are so many what ifs in this film, to be honest. And now, in preparation for this, for the podcast here, I did go back and I read the original script. So going into this, the initial thought was that Kevin Bacon and Reba McEntire were both going to reprise their roles, and with those big names comes a bigger budget. So there was a script written initially that had both characters in. They both play pretty big roles in the film itself. Like, I know we're gonna dive in the cast and crew. Grady's character didn't even exist. It was Earl and Val throughout this whole thing. And I know I'm happy with the film that we got, but reading that script, you really miss the duo of those two, and you get hungry of being like, man, I wish these two, I wish we could see this, and we never will, and
Yeah, I mean, I want to say, like, before we continue on with this, is just like, I think maybe thinking back on it, that could have been a hang up I might have had even at a young age, the fact that Kevin Bacon wasn't back, or Reba or anything like that, but mostly Kevin Bacon for me being that young. But like, I think like I just grew to watch this one, accept it for what it was because I enjoyed it so much that now I really don't see a world where I know what that's like
yeah,
anymore. It's tough to really think about that because, like I said, it's been a staple for me for so long that like it's I just always know after watching Tremors that he's not in Tremors 2, but it's like it's fine. So I mean, I can understand if like you're trepidatious or you have issue with the fact that Kevin Bacon's not back, or Reba McEntire for sake. She had a great character in the first. Um, and I could see why you would hold off from that. But I think that this movie does have enough legs to stand on its own and
yeah.
keep getting into it. But
And just as a little side note there, and I think they really do use both Kevin Bacon and Reba McEntire not coming back as they don't just ignore the whole scenario. Where I do love that idea, and I know that we'll probably get into it a little bit down the line here, that there was a pilot shot with Kevin Bacon reprising that role, and I don't know what the scenario was there. I've never read to see what the actual plot was, but I do love that they kind of gave Val that happy ending, at least from Tremors 2, where Earl's like, well, he married a great woman. Why would he want to risk his life? So it's like, I love that they gave Val that, especially with that character from the first one, where he's kind of like this immature wild card, where it's like, oh, so now he's settled down. He has that happy ending. I love that they did that, but then they also used Reba McEntire not coming back as kind of a development for Bert's character, where he's kind of dealing with Reba's character not coming back. That he's dealing with a breakup in a sense himself. So I love that they tackle both of those characters not reprising their roles instead of just ignoring it and acting like it didn't happen, because I think that does add a lot more to Bert's psyche in terms of wanting to see action and wanting to be needed. I think that adds a lot to that character just by that little line that him and Earl share momentarily in the film. I think that's a big deal. But going back to the production here, so initially the production was going to begin in 1993, and just so you know, we got this film in 1996. So this was we suffered a lot of different issues here because the budget was initially 17 million. Just to think about that, the budget that we got was 4 million. So we're talking a huge slash here in terms of what we can do in terms of effects, and there were, and to show the love here, it is such a big thing because a lot of the people either offered to either cut their salary or work for free,
well,
and
that's awesome.
because they just wanted to get the script and the movie out there. And I think that's such a big thing, because you know, you don't hear about that often, and you can kind of tell the love for the script that a lot of the people had here because, you know, it's like, yeah, if we have to take a pay cut, we'll take a pay cut. And I'm curious to see if like any of the main actors had offered to take a pay cut just because they love the script so much.
Yeah, I mean, like if you can have that kind of dedication to a film, like you know that the movie has, you know, at least a very solid chance of turning out pretty good. Because like you just have people that believe in the material and they just want to get it done. I don't think anybody should ever have to take a salary cut or, you know, work for free. I think that you should never have to do that. But I mean, if you are secure enough and you will do it and you're not being asked to do it, then I mean, yeah, like more power to you. Like, you know, there's a reason why people love this art form and why they dedicate so much of their lives to it. I mean, like it's just like it is a passion, and it's great to see that, especially for something like this. But what I can't get over is that slash from
Yeah.
17 million to 4. What a
Yep.
slap in the face. Did is there a reason behind that other than just they couldn't sign Kevin Bacon?
Nope. As soon as Kevin Bacon and Reba McEntire, Kevin Bacon decided on Apollo 11.
Okay.
Reba
13.
McEntire. Oh,
Apollo
yes.
11's
Why
the
do I
horror
always say
movie with the
yeah?
rocks.
Apollo 13, and Reba McEntire had a tour that she could not get out of to do the filming.
Yeah.
So as soon as they both were not signed on, this is how it works. It was usually uh, it was going to be produced by MCA Universal. It was going to have a theatrical release. So, you know, with a theatrical release, they're assuming you're going to get a bigger return because the original did not do great at the box office, but it got
It
that
did
cult like following.
gangbusters on video rental sales.
Yes. So
Yeah.
with how it performed outside of the theater, they said there's a market for this. Let's do a theatrical release for two. MCA Universal was going to do it as soon as Kevin Bacon and Reba McEntire were not going to return. They really tabled it. They didn't really have too much of an interest until uh, um, you know, they had the script and everything, and they moved it to MCA Universal Home Video. So as soon as that had happened, it got a demotion. So no theatrical release. We're just going to do a home video release, and there wasn't that much interest in it. So, and to kind of go through this, so initial production began in 1993. The film took place of 27 days of shooting in early 1994. We did not
Oh
get this
wow.
until April 9th, 1996. So one of the big things here was that it got filmed over so many positive reviews in the theater on those test groups. They had kind of were deciding on maybe potentially doing a theatrical release, but eventually decided it wasn't too economical because it was going to be so expensive to do the theatrical release. They ended up just releasing it in home video. So you don't get the budget when you're going straight to home video. So it's like it was just
Yeah.
those two not returning was really the nail in the coffin for what could be done in the film. Their hands were tied.
And that's just so disappointing because it's like it's you know, like they're big parts. They're great characters in the first one, but I mean, really, what sells this movie, I think, to a lot of horror fans, and to like me especially, it's the creatures, it's the effects,
Yeah,
it's the concept in general of these massive worms coming up and eating people. Like that's what I'm there to see. You know, the characters are great, and I might be, you know, eating my own words here by saying, you know, oh, but I'm here for the effects, I'm here for that, because I always say characters are, you know, one of the most important parts. But like the fact of the matter is that they've already done the legwork for some of them, like
yeah,
especially, you know, like Fred Ward's character and everything. So it's like, and Burt Gummer, I mean, like you've done the work, so it's like they're already there, they're established. If you do exactly what they ended up doing with them, which is just giving them some depth, and it's nice that, you know, when they went back and, you know, kind of tailored this, that they made it work. Like they gave Bert some real serious stuff going on with him and his wife getting a divorce and everything. I love that scene. I love the reveal of the Graboid in the wall and everything. I think that's so
yeah,
funny. That's so cool from the first film. And it's just like, you know, the conversation plays for laughs in a lot of ways, but it's still you're speaking their language, you know, when he's telling telling him that you know, she asked for the HK or whatever the hell
Yep.
the gun was, to be shipped back. He's like, I know it's over. I know that we're done. And it's just like that shit's hilarious. Like I love that. But it's just like I just can't get over the fact that like, they really lost all this faith just because those two actors wouldn't return. And from what it sounds like, it was mostly just scheduling conflicts. So it's like,
And for this to be the discussion to take place in 1993, and then this film to be filmed in 1994 but not get a release till 1996 is
I
like,
know.
could this have just been remedied over the span of 6 months? And
Yeah.
just to kind of have them return and just put off production, which it seemed like the studio was not even that interested in as soon as Kevin Bacon and Reba McEntire didn't, pulled out of the film. So it's like, could this have just been remedied if we had moved production back to the later half of 1994? Because again, this really goes back. I think I'm happy with the product that we got with Tremors 2, but it also remains probably for me one of the biggest what if films out there, because it's like there was so much put into this on the initial production, and then it got put on hold for a while because of those characters not returning. It really ended up with a lot of questions of what could have been here.
Yeah. I mean, that's just, we could play that game all day of what if this, what if that. But at the end of the day, I think the studio uh, didn't have the balls. They were too afraid. I think like they really cut this film off, not at the knee, but like at the waist, really.
Yeah.
And the fact that it still came out and as good as it is shows all the passion and all the effort in the world goes to this crew and this cast. And
Yeah.
I mean, like they really brought it home.
And the dedication for them. To be honest, like we'll get into. I never know where to put the full on script stuff here, because honestly, I will say that there were some ideas in that original script that may not have worked with a budget. There's a scene where it's like they had to cut things, for the sake of the budget, that I think maybe not wouldn't have translated so much onto film. The beats of the film where there's a beat in there, when they get stuck and they're eating all the food,
Yeah. Hmm.
and they're multiplying. So in the original script, it's written as they're eating so much that the building actually begins to bulge.
Hmm.
That there's so many in there, and then the building just splits, and they all come running out. And for me, that sounds okay on paper. I mean, for me, I guess it's questionable on paper anyway. But I understand what you're trying, what visual you're trying to present there. But for me, it's like I don't know necessarily if that would have ever worked on film. And then it kind of we go to splitting a building to all the basically them the shriekers chasing our characters back into another building. And it's like, you kind of cut it. They kind of condensed in that instance where we just go into one building, and then that's where Earl goes in with the CO2 and all that stuff, instead of having to kind of go back and forth, which originally that was Val instead of Earl. But
Okay.
so and that's another thing where it's like, I think maybe with the slash in the budget, the story turned out a little more lean and mean,
Hmm.
but really where they ended up feeling it were the effects.
Yeah. And like I'm not sitting here saying the effects are bad by any means in this. They're actually quite impressive, knowing that this was only $4 million.
Yeah.
But if you're saying that there's stuff from the script that's been cut with the bulging of this, what other things could you point out from the script that you say were just undoable on that kind of a budget?
So they have another scene where one of the side characters, that I think it might be the character that gets eaten outside of the window when he's talking to
Julia.
yes, he is an avid collector of weapons, and Kate mentions that they're totally out of ammo, and she mentions that he's an avid collector. So Bert and Mrs. Gummer, I don't know her first name, end up having
Mhm.
they run to the trailer to get these weapons, and it turns out that they're a bunch of Civil War weapons. So they
Uh,
kind of have this whole scene that again I don't feel like it would have worked translating onto film where uh, both Bert and his wife are carrying muskets, and the doctor has a wheelbarrow filled with. They've already pre-filled. You know how you have to jam the gunpowder
yeah,
down and all that
they
stuff.
pre-filled all the guns.
Yep. So she just has a wheelbarrow filled with them, and she's wheeling it, and they're just grabbing them and doing the one shots to each shrieker, and then Val and um, Earl join them, and they're all just kind of blowing away all these different all the different shriekers until they run out of ammo. Which I think it plays for fun on a script. I don't know if it would have translated onto film.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's an out there idea. I think it's a lot of fun. I think
Yeah,
that would have been cool to see, but yeah, no, I get it. It's definitely, is it getting to that point where that might have been a little ridiculous? Yes. And I think you're right. I think the limitations center this story for Tremors
yep,
2. I think that, like, we stay with our characters, we stay with our, basic concepts, and then we expand upon that just a little bit, and we
yeah,
give a little more history to them. We give a little more history to the Graboids themselves, and I just think, like, that was definitely the better play. It's just unfortunate, again, like, I gotta side with them, that they had all this trouble and they had to lose all that money, because I'm sure even if these weren't the final ideas, if these didn't make it in the film because of just how they played out, like, they could have probably come up with some even more creative stuff. Like,
yeah,
like, what could the Shriekers have looked like? I've always said, like, the Shriekers are great. I think they're a fine addition, but they are pretty like bare bones. They're basically just the head of the creature on a chicken body,
yeah,
and like, that's all they really are. I get that they're babies, but it's just one of those things where it's just kind of like, with a little bit more money, what more could we have seen from them? And I think they look very good. The practical effects for the Shriekers is awesome. Like, we'll get into that with Creatures Features in a little bit here, but yeah, they really do a good job with it.
yeah. Well, I think we can move into because we'll talk about the shriekers because I have my own opinions on those, but um we can jump into our next little segment here because that kind of ties in with the script as well.
All righty, let's get to it.
You are all my children now.
You Are All My Children. This is where we talk about the cast and the crew
Scary.
involved in this flick and all the others we'll be discussing here. This is where we kind of get them a chance to shine. I think, like, one of the things that we did in our past reviews here, with just kind of the more freeform structure, was sometimes we go in great detail about talking about a cast, others we kind of brush over it and focus more on other elements of the films. So it's like just dedicating it and just actually giving these people, the honor they deserve, I would say. And then I'm excited to see what happens when we watch a really shitty movie and
Oh
see what
man,
we have to say, where we're just basically sitting them down like disappointed parents at the principal's office. Like, what did you do? What
what
did
the
you do,
hell's
my
going
boy?
on here?
But yeah, I mean, cast and crew. Luke, what do you got for us here, man? Like, who do you want to start with?
I think we're going to start with the director offhand first.
Okay.
Sean S. Wilson, credited as S.S. Wilson, as you see in the opening of Tremors 2. He eventually went on to direct Tremors 4.
Hmm.
He did the story work for Tremors 3. Some of his other writing credits include Short Circuit 1 and 2,
Oh
fabulous
wow,
films. If you have ever seen it.
I love Short Circuit.
Do you really?
I do. Yes. No, that
Okay,
was
I was
another one that I got to
anticipating you
watch.
had never seen that, so
No, I've seen both of them.
I, those are not horror films, but I would love to talk about them. A remake for Short Circuit that is a horror film could be.
Yes. Yeah, there you go. And then it could be like a chopping mall, like, reveal
There
at
we
the end,
go.
like he's just a security robot. And
Fucking.
I think we could really blend those two franchises together.
There we go. Johnny Five is
Mm.
alive. Um,
That's the tagline of the movie with the red eyes on the cover, and it's just darkness.
There you go. Turns into Terminator. What can you do?
Uh-oh. We're pitching another movie. Look at us go.
So he also did Wild Wild West,
Mm.
which I've never seen. I don't know if it's. I know it was a big film when it came out,
Mm-mm.
but
No
you've
good.
seen it?
Yes.
No good?
No good.
I don't plan on seeing it. I've avoided it. I think it came out, what, 1999? I've avoided it thus far, so I don't
Yep.
have any plans on ever actually seeing it. Yeah, so he actually directed this film. He offered to direct it for free, so that this film could get made. He also had written the screenplay. So you can tell he absolutely loves working with these Tremors, on these Tremors films. Again, I haven't seen 4. You have seen 4?
I have. I've seen all of the sequels at
Okay.
least once. 4, it's been quite some time for me, but yeah, no, I'm familiar. And yeah, it's a totally different take. Like I said, it's a prequel. It's set in the Old West. I guess you can really see where his Wild Wild West roots really came in, even though that movie is just weird on its own. But it's yeah, it's different. It's tough to say whether or not it's good or bad because, like I said, I haven't seen it in so long.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, it definitely, if we're talking about it's doing the here, another plug for Prey. Just like Prey is going back in time, they go back in time here. It's very
Okay.
much that Prey or Back to the Future 3 kind of. I think it may be a better comparison to that.
Okay. Yeah, so you can tell. I feel like at least the crew, and the cast had some sort of level of confidence bringing him back for this film because he's so involved. Written the script, clearly has a love for it. So, and I think that shows through in terms of where we're going with the story here, as we talked about in the synopsis. So, um, you know, I think he mostly does a lot of writing, but it's just like I think he is the man when it comes to Tremors.
Mhm.
So I feel like it probably wouldn't have been as successful if Sean S. Wilson was not behind the camera on this one.
I agree. I think like he's got the passion, the way you said he did it for free, like you can't beat that. It's like they just want the story to get out there. They feel confident enough in it. Like it is just like as a goal, like, I want to be a filmmaker. We have aspirations together to write and direct films. So, if the opportunity arose itself and, it was all there, the budget was all there, but I wasn't getting paid, I'd still take it. I mean, like you
Yeah.
got to, because then, it can always come back to you in the end. But so I think that's very admirable for him.
And now we can move on to Miss Helen Shaver, plays Dr. Kate Riley, who ends up being Earl's love interest for
Mhm.
the film. And I also love her character because she is like the all-knowing. She's the one where, um, Earl, Bert, and Grady are all just kind of rambling about how does this make sense? How does this make sense? And she's the one kind of, connecting A to B to C and saying, they're Precambrian, they're asexual hermaphrodites, all this stuff where she's kind of giving those terms of this is what it means. And she's kind of our oracle in that sense of
Mhm.
explaining it to the audience themselves, because basically Earl, Bert, and Grady are the audience when they're asking those questions. So I think she's, I think this is a great follow up from the original Tremors. In this time around where Earl has the love interest because we had seen Val and now Earl's finally finding his lady.
No, that's awesome. Like I definitely agree. I think that plays really well. I think they make a very cute couple on screen. They got nice chemistry. Um, yeah, I thought that she was a great addition. I also like the little nod to her ending up being, what was that? What issue of like
It's
Playboy
like
or whatever it was, like
at
1970 something.
1974, I believe.
Okay,
Might
yeah.
have been.
Yeah, he points that out early in the film and just says, like, oh, this is like what keeps
It's like a
me
throwaway.
throwaway. It's like, yeah, he's like, this is what keeps me motivated. This is what keeps me, sane or whatever, or grounded, I think he says. And there's the fact that she ends up being, of all the things, she ended up being that model.
Yeah.
And so he gets to end up with his dream girl. It's a nice touch, he earns it for sure. Because,
And
Val always got all the attention in
yeah.
the first film. So
And honestly, with this one, as we're talking about like differences in the script, and it's such a minor difference in the script, but the way that the like unveiling, I think in the actual film itself happens way better because I believe they're on top of the tower as they're
Mhm.
just kind of sitting there talking, killing time, and then he finds out. Whereas like in the original script, it's such a, like, shoehorned in, line at the very end where it's like, "Oh, yeah, by the way, that was my next thing," because he mentions, that the pinup that he has, and she goes, "Oh, who told you?" And then it's like, "I was gonna be my next thing that I was gonna tell you in terms of if you want," because he's talking about, like, moving to wherever she lives, and it's such, like,
Oh,
a
okay.
shoehorn thing, and I'm like, "This feels unnatural." So I think the way that the revising that they had done in the unveiling during, like, the middle of the movie is way better than what was actually pitched in that original script because it did not work.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's it's definitely a little bit more handled with a little more care
Yeah,
in the actual film itself.
but
I
s
think that
I
whole
in
set piece is very cool too, with just Bert being in the construction equipment and just looking around with his knife and everything, and everybody's just
yeah,
separated. It's just really cute stuff.
and we'll get into that in a minute because that is actually, in the original script, an entirely different character.
Oh, okay.
So we can move on to Christopher Garton playing Grady Hoover, which
Hmm.
again in the original script does not even exist because we're talking about Earl and Val, and Grady was created basically after Kevin Bacon was not going to be returning. So it's funny to see the how the lines have been divvied up between the original Val lines have been divvied up between Earl and Grady, and it's like um even in that original Tremors, Earl was very much the straight man to Val's kind of flamboyant, eccentric kind of character. And you can witness some of those lines that were originally Val's in Tremors 2, the script, have been transferred over to Earl, and you can kind of be like, yeah, that does. When you look at it in hindsight, you're really like, yeah, that seems like a Val line more than an Earl line. So it's funny to
Hmm.
watch that. But there are some that Grady has as well. He is very much, you know, at the very end there, it was Val pitching Earl on the monster
The
theme
theme
park,
part.
and yep, and
Nice,
not
nice.
Grady.
Yeah, so I think he's a welcome addition. I mean, like, he's fine. Again, it could have gone either way with his character. He could have been like just really annoying and just get under your
Yep.
skin, but I think that he's lovable enough and really just sells you enough on his character that like he does you warm up to him quite quickly. And I think the relationship between him and Earl is really strong too. And even just the interplay between when Michael Gross's character gets there, Bert,
Yep.
and they start like talking shit to each other on the radios and stuff like that. Like, oh, I got 5 over this way. Oh, I got 2 over this way. Like it's very fun. He just feels like he fits into that group. I would love to see him actually interact between uh, Val and Earl as well.
Yes.
I think that he would be a very good addition to that.
And he was again, like you're saying, he feels like a natural fit. It doesn't feel like we were trying to find a character to just shove in here to play opposite of Earl. I think Grady is a character that I have been wanting to honestly see a return to the franchise.
Hmm.
For some reason, when I was waiting on 3, I was like, I really hope Grady returns. I knew nothing about it. I was just like, I really hope he's in there, and I was depressed when he never actually showed up. But
Hmm.
he's a character that I feel like if this came out in 1996, you were going to do a follow up in 1998 or something like that, you could have gotten a lot more mileage out of that Grady character because I feel like he is such a fun character on screen, and he doesn't feel like he's being forced upon the audience. He's just kind of got this lovable quality about him, and I think it works with that interplay with both Bert and Earl.
Yeah, no, I think that he's a good middleman between the two.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, we can move on to our two heavy hitters here. The staples in the Tremors franchise, Mr. Michael Gross, playing Burt Gummer, who
Hmm.
plays in, as we've talked about, several other installments in the Tremors franchise.
He's in every single sequel. Like, he doesn't miss a single beat. So, like, he is our through line after this point, basically. Like, he is the only original cast member to stick around and see this thing through, and it's awesome.
Yeah,
I mean,
it works.
he kills this role. Bert Gummer is him. Like, I mean, this is what he'll be known for.
Yep.
I think by a lot of people, it's like either that or Family Ties. But again, people my age, like the only reason I
We're
think I
so
know
far
that,
removed
yeah, it's
from.
like I think I know that just because I grew up watching it. So it's one of those
Yeah.
things where it's like there's going to be a lot of people that don't like going forward. So it's like they're just going to know him as Burt Gummer, and
Yeah.
I mean that's great. I'm happy that he sticks with the character and that he's still playing it. He's still having fun, and like he's consistent. I will say through all of these, even once we get to the more recent direct-to-video ones, he is consistent. Like he brings the character every single time, and it's awesome. I think he's just great.
And honestly, watching the most recent one, that was a selling point for me, where I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't really care what's going to happen. I just want to see what Michael Gross is up to be honest, playing that character, just to see what kind of situation he gets into. And he owns it. He's still perfect at it. It's like, um, uh, I I don't think that all these other Tremors installments would have been made if Michael Gross did not come back to reprise that role.
Yeah, and I mean he's chewing up the scenery too. Like I mean,
Yep.
like he really does. There's a lot of great moments. The GIF I have selected where he's hopping out of the truck just after he was attacked, and he's talking about how he's like, "I am completely out of ammo. I was
Yep.
denied important information, all this stuff." Like just the way he carries himself and talks, like he is just entertaining from the second he comes back on screen.
Yeah. And he's just so much where he's got the MREs,
Hmm.
totally prepared for everything, and it kind of, I love that. Basically, his catchphrase in Tremors 2 is, "How was I supposed to know?" Where it's like when he
Hmm.
shoots the Shrieker and it goes through the wall, through the
And into the
barrel,
car.
and yeah, and he goes, "How was I supposed to know?" And then when they chase him into the storage shed and it's filled with food, and he goes, "How
Yep.
was I supposed to know?" It's
To
like
know.
he can't do anything right in this film, and I absolutely love it.
So good, so good. I mean, he is the MVP of this franchise. We got to say, like, you know, I give it to you, Michael Gross. Thanks for sticking around because, like, every time I do watch a new Tremors movie or any Tremors content, I expect to see him in it, and he always brings his A game. So it's
Yeah.
just awesome to see it through and
And
through.
one more scene I want to talk about his that I always chuckle every time is that ending scene when he's like, you set an explosive, and he goes, "What?" And then they're gonna take shelter
Oh yeah,
behind like one shed. He goes, "No, keep going, keep going." He goes, "It's gonna be big, big."
yeah,
It's like I just love that. They're all ready to post up shop to hide, and he's still darting because he
yeah.
knows
He's like,
exactly
no,
what's in
no, no,
store.
no. Yeah,
Yep.
no. I mean, he sells it so well, and it's just like it's why I think like if you ever remade Tremors and you recast this character, it would be a no-win situation. Like you just
Yeah.
couldn't do it. He is a
I think
staple.
you'd have to retire it. You could not recast it.
Absolutely not. But Tremors doesn't need a remake, in my
No, not
opinion.
at all.
And we'll
Nope.
get into
Well,
that maybe when
yes.
we talk about Tremors down the road.
Well, we have a legacy section here, so we'll
Okay, yeah, yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there.
all
Um,
right.
but yeah, we got to
And
talk the man himself, Fred Ward.
Fred Ward as
Rest
Earl
in peace.
Bassett. Which
Yeah, I mean,
like I had said, I had seen Tremors 2 before I had seen Tremors. So I feel like for a lot of people who had seen Tremors, Val was kind of their guy because of Kevin Bacon was such a big name. He's feels like a main character. Where for me, Fred Ward as Earl Bassett was always my guy.
oh
Even
yeah,
I always thought like I was introduced to Earl Bassett with a little bit of longer hair, like how he is in this one. And I just thought he was such a badass. So it's like even going back to the original Tremors after seeing Tremors 2, Earl was always my guy. I mean, I love Kevin Bacon, I love Val, but Earl has always been my absolute favorite in the franchise. So to kind of see him again, because Val's lines got divvied up a little bit, we kind of see a little more animated um, Earl in this one. And it's like that opening scene with Wildfire where he's trying to tame the ostrich. That is Val's scene originally, and they switch it out to be Earl. So in hindsight, it does feel like a Val scene, but it's like since they had Fred Ward there, they used him for that scene, and I think it inadvertently adds a lot to his character. It's like because he loosens up a little bit, and he's a little bit funnier in this one than we see in the original. He's not just a straight man to Val's flamboyant, eccentric kind of character. I think he opens up a lot in this one.
And that's always great to see. I mean, just like getting, even just because, like, he was, I guess, lower man on the totem pole when it comes to the billing and the casting there. I mean, you get that. But I think the fact that they had him come back and, he was able to, even with everything that happened, he was still able to, be the lead character. They still allowed that and they made it happen, which is great. Like I'm super happy about that because like he definitely deserves it. Like if unfortunately with his passing, we'll never get to see it, but I was always hoping whenever one of these sequels would come out that he'd at least pop up again.
Yeah.
Just because, like, I mean, even for a cameo, but just to see him and Burt Gummer on screen again, just would have been awesome. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it just really would have been a sight to see for sure.
Yeah, because like in 2003, when I believe it's 2003, it may have been a little bit earlier, but whenever Tremors 3 came out, I was still kind of in my naive believing that if someone was in the sequel, they should be in the follow up. So I was like, oh, I want Grady back and Earl back for Tremors 3, and it's like no one shows up except Bert, and I was like, oh, man, this doesn't even feel like Tremors anymore to me. So he was another one I had always wanted to see back in some form in the franchise. I really would have loved to see if they could have gotten all these characters back for one final film. But what can you do? It won't happen. But
in another reality, but it did. So just keep that in mind. In another reality, it did.
In another reality. And then I do want to bring up one last thing here because I did read the script. There's another character that's in the script that was totally kaput, trashed, did not even show up. So his name's Hank, the Wild Man Willoughby, and he's just kind of like this outlaw kind of. Now they call him, they describe him as a gringo expatriate, living in Mexico at that time. So he's kind of like this biker that doesn't listen to anyone, but kind of he's like kind of, I guess you'd say, more of a badass and a rogue kind of character. So, when you were talking about Bert jumping into the little lip of the tractor, that's actually Hank's character that does that in the original script. So he's kind of he ends up sticking around to the very end. Actually, you think they do a little fake out, and you think he's actually killed, but he is not. They use those, at the very beginning, when they use the empty oil
the oil drums.
That is actually used later on in the film when he's going to get help and he's knocked off his motorcycle by the Shriekers, and then you don't see him pop up until the very end. Now a little bit of a casting here on my end that I was thinking. Now, in the script, he was mentioned as, I guess, a gringo expatriate, which is what I wanted to bring up. But for me, I probably would have disregarded that and did my own casting here and would have went with Danny Trejo. I would have loved to have seen if we had that original script and we would have had Kevin Bacon, Fred Ward, Michael Gross, and Danny Trejo all in one film together in a Tremors film, I would have been like, this would have been firing on all cylinders for me.
That would have been very fun to see, very interesting, and especially of that time, the early 2000s. Like he was definitely one of those guys that was popping up in just everything. Danny Trejo was. Guy's got a stacked career, so it's like the fact that he didn't show up in a Tremors movie, a little odd, but. Hey.
Yeah, you think it would have shown up in like Tremors 6, but what can you do?
What are you gonna do?
Overall, I think the cast works so well together, though. What they had, even though we didn't get Kevin Bacon and Reba McEntire coming back, I still think with what they had, they really did knock it out of the park because everyone does their jobs. No no one feels out of place. They all feel relatable and like you're rooting for them. You're not looking at anyone saying, "Oh, I hope they get killed in a horrible fashion." So I think that gave great casting all around.
Absolutely. I think that they really stuck to their guns. They did what they could. They brought their A game, and it shows. And I think that they carry this film. Like I said, they are the sturdy legs to bolster this film through everything. Because I mean, like, I think our next section here, we can start talking a little bit about the effects and the creatures themselves, which are also, I'd say, the other half or the flip side of that coin.
Yep,
But
let's get into it.
yeah, I think the cast did a phenomenal job.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
One of my all-time favorite cinematic creatures, of course, John Carpenter's The Thing, is going to be highlighting for our Creatures Features segment. And as you can see, the little image we've selected to is Rick Baker with his beautiful werewolf. So if you haven't checked out our Werewolves Not Swearwolves episode 1, since we've done the new format, check that out because we do a little deep dive on that whole process in and of itself. But
That
we're not
one
here to
was a
talk
lot of
about
fun.
werewolves. We're here to talk about graboids and shriekers.
Ah,
Some of the most unique and interesting and what the fuck ideas I think in Hollywood at the time. Like you're pitching a movie, and I'm pulling this from the first one. We'll dive deeper into this when we do cover the first one later on down the road. But this movie was pitched as Jaws on land for the first
yes.
film. And so that's what's the selling point to it. And they just eventually moved into just becoming these giant worms and just kind of evolved from there. And then with the second one, we have the addition of the Shriekers, which again, we've already discussed, is a little bit of their evolutionary chain there. It further continues and gets more muddled as you go down the films, but in my head canon, this is what it is. So you start as Shrieker, you become Graboid until you die, and then you make more Shriekers. Perfect life. You get to eat a bunch of people, burrow around in the dirt, all good stuff. But kidding aside, I think the Tremors are some of the most unique and very fun to watch, creatures on screen. And I appreciate that, especially these early films with all the practical effects these films use.
Yes. And Dylan, a little trivia here. Can you guess what the most expensive scene in the film was?
This film.
Yes, Tremors 2.
Okay. Was it the dead tremor coming out of the ground with the its side busted open?
It was not that, but you're close. It was the opening scene. Where
Really?
the guys on the pipe. It was because they used they reused a graboid from the original film, and the alterations that they had to make and to make it move
Oh, so
caused it to be so expensive.
that's crazy.
There's actually an article I'll post this coming week on Twitter because there's so much in-depth focus on it that I can't even begin to go into how they made it work. But
Mhm.
there's a couple of pictures, and it really does go into in depth about the effects and what they had to do to make everything work. I'll post that on Twitter later this week, so you can check it out.
Yeah, no,
Um,
for sure.
but it's like, and that is kind of like one of those things where I know we've talked about practical versus CGI, but it's like, just that little scene made the film like that most expensive because they had to try and make that giant graboid move.
Yeah, you never would have got me with that one. That seems like such a simple shot, but I
Yeah.
mean, all right, yeah, whatever, I
No,
guess.
yeah, it surprised me as well because they had to use I can't remember to make it like projectile go up and move and all that stuff. So it takes so many people just to move a giant graboid. But on this film, they did have two different companies work on the Shriekers themselves, obviously because you have some with practical and some CGI. So two different studios tackling the Shriekers and the Graboids. But the
Yeah, no.
Graboids were all practical.
I think they look great. As far as the Shriekers go, I was gonna bring it up a little bit earlier. I love how they use the little flap on their head for
Yes.
infrared sensoring. Like I think that's really cool. It's unique. It's definitely a really smart way to take the characters or the creatures themselves. And I mean the classic Graboid. I mean, like it's what a swell looking design. Like it just looks like a really horrifying thing to get eaten by. I mean, not only do you have to deal with the pincers and the little teeth inside of it and everything, but you got those little tongues that come out and they play such a
Yes.
huge role in the first one, but they're not really present in this one. I noticed.
Yeah.
This go around.
They
They
pop
don't
up a
really come
little
up a
bit.
little bit.
But yeah, because they talk about it in that article where it's like part of the evolutionary chain where it's like they're there, but they're not fully developed yet.
Mm,
So they wanted to show little attributes of what they will become in terms of being a graboid. So those things exist, but they're not really defined qualities yet because they are babies.
mhm.
Which I do love that the care that they had taken where they talk about their beaks being a little translucent, almost like a baby's skin or a baby's skull in terms of hardening in terms of cartilage, and how there was a really long thought process in terms of the development of the Shriekers themselves. And in terms of the practicality of it, Amalgamated Studio or Dynamics Inc. were the ones that were primarily in charge of the practical effect.
Mhm.
So it was created by Stan Winston alumni Tom Woodruff Jr. and Alec Gillis in 1988. Some of their famous works include Tremors, Alien 3, Demolition Man, Wolf, The Santa Claus. They were actually working on Jumanji when this had come up, so they had to do some advising from Vancouver, I believe, while that was happening. They worked on
Nice.
the Spider-Man trilogy, The Thing 2011, which was probably something we will end up talking about, maybe
We
a deep
will.
dive.
We'll get there.
Um, It 2017, Godzilla versus Kong,
Okay.
and get ready for this mention, Prey 2022.
Very cool. Always bringing it back to Prey. God, if that movie sucks, like we're gonna look like such assholes for
I
talking about it
know.
all the time. But yeah,
Then
no,
we're
I
gonna have
mean,
to mention it twice as much just to kind of drive it home.
I'd say they knock it out of the park. I think like it's such a
Yeah.
unique design. It's a simple design. They're fun. They don't necessarily scare me or anything. I don't think they're nearly as intimidating. I think more as a group, they might be a bit more intimidating, but like they are a fun foe. They're
Yeah.
good. They remind me of Gremlins for some reason a lot. Just like that I think
What,
they're
the
short in
Shriekers?
stature. Yeah. Just with
Okay.
how like they're just getting into stuff all the time and they're just like,
Wreaking
they're
havoc.
acting like children and like,
Ye
they really have that mentality. It's like the full mature Tremors, Graboids, is they're just pure intimidation. They're just pure attack, they're predators.
and, um, I do love that they kind of, they don't go too much I don't think they mention it at all actually in the film, but in the script, they're actually very much like, um, if one dies, the other Shriekers will just eat him. They don't even care. So
Mm.
it's like they kind of there's a scene in the original script where, one of them's, like, kind of almost dead, but not fully dead, and one tries to take a bite out of him, and that one gets pissed because it's like, "Hey, I'm not dead yet." So it's like they are very immature in that sense,
Mhm.
and I think that's a lot of fun because it does kind of play through a little bit, but I think overall, I love the anatomy of them. I think it's fun, like how you kind of mentioned where it just kind of looks like on a chicken body, but I think that's kind of part of the charm with them because it is that the head part is going to exist later on. So it's like that's the part you want to focus on is basically a Tremor's head on legs, and I think that's kind of what they wanted to focus on because it is part of the evolution of those legs are just going to fall off and they're going to go underground anyway. So I love the design. I think it's a lot of fun. I love the orange,
Mhm.
the little with the infrared thing. I think that really sticks out because it's such a mundane, organic color, and then you have this like fleshy orange flap opening.
Yeah, no, it
to
is pretty
see.
unsettling.
So I love that. I love the orange blood, the orange goo that kind of comes out when Bert splatters one with a big old elephant gun that he has. It's like
Mhm.
those visuals I think are just absolutely stunning. You can tell that they put a lot of thought into that design, I think,
Mhm.
and to how it was going to look on camera.
Absolutely, and they were definitely a whole mess of fun to see. They're a good time. I like their addition to the franchise for sure. They do change it up for the better, I would say.
Yeah.
Unlike the ass blaster as we get a little further into the franchise, but we'll talk about that at some point down the road.
And I think this is really where I think they felt the budgetary slash because, uh, they have the practical shriekers, but they only have a handful of them. You can tell they were really
Yeah,
um, making use of the ones that they do have because it's like I think at most in terms of the actual practical shriekers, like three at most end up on screen together at once because they didn't have them. They made a couple and that was really what they had. They had some fully I think they had what? I think they had 2 fully articulated ones, and then the other ones were just random, like, unjointed
and they
articulated
just kind
rubber
of
ones.
stayed still.
Yep. So it's like,
Gotcha.
they really had to be crafty in terms of shooting one next to the other. Fun little tidbit because I know you did mention that the scene where they're ripped open, the one Graboid's ripped open.
Yep.
Now, the effect that they used there was a hot melt material that they used on the Santa Claus, where his belly's jiggling. Um, it's the same material that they used for that Graboid, so they could get the jiggling of as he was being eaten from the inside out, which I
Gotcha.
thought was fun.
Yeah, is that really how the anatomy works? They eat their previous host from the inside out?
Yes, that's how it works. So they're getting all their nourishment by the time that they come out, and in theory, can already regurgitate another shrieker uh,
Interesting.
upon being birthed. So,
Yeah.
um,
What a
but
horrible life cycle, actually. I take it all back from earlier when I said what a fun life to live as a tremor.
nope, you've already committed.
Oh boy.
That's where you come back in another life, man.
Ugh.
Um, The other, like I said, there were 2 studios. The other one focused on the CGI. They
Mhm.
actually developed the digital input device. This was Tippett Studios, which were, uh, those like little balls that you see a lot of people do CGI. It's like to kind
Yeah.
of get the motion. They developed that actually.
Really?
Yes, and they were actually working on Jurassic Park as well. So the CGI in here, I mean, you can tell it's 90s CGI.
Mhm.
There was no way around it. I
I was
I don't
gonna say
know.
there is no way around that, but I think it's
Um,
effective for what it is.
yeah, I don't think it takes you out of it. I mean, it's noticeable, but it's not. It's like you weren't going to be able to really do that practically anyway. So
It's of its time, but it's forgivable, especially knowing this movie was made for $4 million.
yeah, it's like I think it was more than adequate for what we had to work with. So it is what it is. It doesn't take me out of the film. I think maybe it adds a little bit to that 90s charm because, that's what you're going to get. So overall, I mean, I love the Shriekers. I think it was a great next step in the Tremors franchise. So overall, it's like those practicals, they look perfect as well. It's like they really did
Mhm.
a really nice job on them.
Oh yeah. But I think that can move us into our final segment here, talking about you know what's going to be going on with our final thoughts on Tremors 2.
Just listen to the old Pork Chop Express and take his advice on a dark and stormy night, all right? When some wild-eyed 8-foot-tall maniac grabs your neck, taps the back of your favorite head up against a barroom wall, and he looks you crooked in the eye, and he asks you if you've paid your dues, well, you just stare that big sucker right back in the eye, and you remember what old Jack Burton always says at a time like that. Have you paid your dues, Jack? Yes, sir, the check is in the mail.
What an awesome quote.
How
That's
much Kurt Russell is in this episode? Jesus.
there's gonna be a lot. I mean, I think like with the new format, Kurt Russell's in the opening twice.
Yeah. Well,
He's also two of our segment switches, and also he's got the image right there for a check is in the mail.
I didn't want that to sound like I was over Kurt Russell, because I want to stress on this podcast, the official uh, opinion is there is no such thing as too much Kurt Russell. So
Absolutely not. No, the man can do no wrong. He's brilliant in every role that he is in. We are big Kurt Russell stans. Please come on our podcast, Kurt, and we can talk about all your wonderful
I want to
filmography.
talk Overboard.
Yes, Overboard. Let's talk that. Let's talk about the Santa Claus movies he does on Netflix. All the good shit. But yeah, we're sticking with this one as the check is in the mail. So coming from Big Trouble in Little China, one of our favorites, we will definitely be covering as we go down the list here. But I think like this just it's a great quote, and really at the end of the day, what we're doing here is we're just giving this whether we're sending this off with our seal of approval or a stamp of denial. Like I guess that's kind of the main focus of this last segment here. We just kind of wrapping it up. Where's the film franchise now? How are we feeling about it? And so I guess without further ado, Luke, this is your pick. So tell me, man, what's how you feeling about Tremors 2? I think we've gushed about it a lot, but I want your thesis. Let me know what's going on.
Well, I absolutely hate it. Would be the original answer here, but to be honest, I think it's more than adequate sequel to the original. I wish we would have had. Not necessarily. We don't need 17 million. I would have loved to 8 million to 9 million, just to kind of focus a little bit more on the effects to see what we would have gotten. I would have loved to have seen Val and Earl ride once again. It didn't happen, but with what we got, I think it was phenomenal. I think it's a fun sequel. It's a little more tongue in cheek than the original, but not overly tongue in cheek. So I think it works great. Again, these are my Tremors, and Tremors 2 are my Tremors universe. It's everything out. Tremors 3 does not work for me. The one that I had seen, the most recent one, didn't really work for me. I just watched it because I wanted to see what the state of the franchise was in now. But the first two are the real ones for me, and that's really where I stop. I would love to see the pilot that Kevin Bacon was in, just to see where that goes.
I love to see that.
I think there's a lot of mileage left in Tremors. I think this is one where you can kind of go that Chucky route, where maybe do a TV show and kind of disregard a lot of what's going on. Because honestly, I really think all you need are Graboids and Shriekers, and that's really all you need in this universe.
That's fair. I would say you could definitely get a little bit more creative too. Maybe add some different creatures. Like, what would be the natural predator of the Graboid? What would be the Graboid's natural prey back in the day? I mean, I know we're pretty much natural prey, but I want to see some other stuff come up. I want some Jurassic World type stuff where we're getting a little bit deeper into it. I want to see what's going on there. So I think that for me, Tremors and Tremors 2 are the pinnacle, the peak, the best part of this franchise. Whether you choose to go on the rest of the path or not is totally up to you. I have taken that journey. It's not the worst. It's definitely not nearly as bad as some of the other horror franchises that I've traveled down to. It's got a lot of fun, and I think the beauty of it is that it doesn't take itself too overly serious at any point. Sometimes that works better than others, but all in all, I would say that like if you've never seen these movies, or if you haven't seen them in a long time, definitely revisit Tremors 2, because I think it's worth the price of admission. It's worth checking out, and I think there's a lot more heart and charm here that we can appreciate nowadays than maybe we didn't back in the day.
Yeah,
I think that if you saw this as a kid, maybe go back and watch it, and it'll just give you those warm feelings that I get when I watch this. This reminds me of, having my little playroom in the basement where I just had all these like toys and stuff. They remodeled it, and I would just watch movies like crazy. And Tremors, the series, was definitely on that radar for me.
and this is a very comforting film because I watched it so much as a kid. As I'm watching it a few times for the podcast, I mean, all those feelings come back. You just feel like a kid watching this film again. It's so much fun. It maintains a certain level of gravitas as well, where they don't go too crazy in terms of comedy. I still feel like it's a real the Shriekers are a real threat, and they're not. It's not made for laughs or anything like that. So overall, I think this was a great sequel. It's one of those films you could just turn on cold and watch. And I mean, I watched this one several times before I'd ever seen the original Tremors, and I didn't feel like I was lost because we were really. If you just drop into Tremors 2 Aftershocks, it's really you get everything you need to know from the very beginning up into when the Shriekers come to life. So it's kind of it can be a standalone film in a sense, and I
Mhm.
think you can have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, and I think that that's the beauty of it is that it doesn't hurt the original in any way. It only serves, just like I feel Jaws 2, to be a little extra piece. Whether you want to take that journey or not is up to you, but I think that this is a worthy of a visit and
Yeah,
definitely worth your time. We wouldn't be covering it if we didn't think so. I mean, like, I don't see many people covering the Tremors franchise, and I don't think many people have gone that deep on Tremors 2. So when you brought it up after Fred Ward's passing, it was just one of those things where I was just like, yeah, that sounds right. I think this is good. Normally, you want to start with the first of a franchise when you're going through it, but I mean, by goddamn, like, he passed away. I think this is for us the definitive Fred Ward film
yep.
in our minds. So it's like we had to cover it. So it's like it's to me that's the legacy that I feel like Tremors 2 will leave off is just that you know whether you want to say it's the pinnacle of his career or not, if some of you feel that's offensive or not, I'm sorry, but for me, I will always, whenever I think about Fred Ward, think about Tremors 2
Yeah,
and
and it's
Tremors.
meant to be a compliment, so
Absolutely. Hmm.
we don't want to hear any sass.
No sass. No, no, no. But yeah, I give this a high rating. I definitely give this a recommendation. Check it out. You won't be disappointed. I think if you're a creature feature fan, if you just love good tongue in cheek adventure horror films, this is one of those.
It remains like the Shriekers remain a serious threat with ever really. It doesn't really ever become a dark toned film, and I think
Hmm.
that's hard to sustain something like that. But I think Tremors 2 does it to perfection.
Absolutely. No pun intended. For the town in the first movie is called Perfection,
Yes,
and then in the third one it's called Back to Perfection.
exactly.
And then in the fourth one it's a prequel that also takes place in the town Perfection before it was Perfection.
I'll see that one I didn't know, but
That
perfect,
that is how they do it, and then they never go back to it again
and that's it.
unless it's in
Just
the TV series from 2003 that I never watched, so can't speak on that one. Have you seen that?
I have not. I forgot it existed until I was doing research here. That's one I would love to get a hold of and maybe bust out for something.
Something we might have coming up,
Yes.
something on the docket. So but well, we won't dive too much into that. But yeah, I think that concludes our Tremors 2 conversation. And what a fun one that was. I always enjoy talking about creature features, and when Luke gets to recommend one every once in a while, it warms my heart. So
There we
uh,
go.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, that about wraps us up here. If you're watching this, tomorrow is the 4th of July. If you're watching this on the day it comes out. So keep an eye out for our Stranger Things series, season 4, Stranger Things 4, however you want to call it. Uh, review. We're going to be going over everything. I know we've talked a little bit about it with
Dylan
volume
hates it.
1. I have some things to say about it. I don't hate it, but I think that I've presented a very complicated relationship with Stranger Things thus far, and I'd like to get some stuff off my chest with this and just give you my thoughts. But yeah, so keep an eye out for that. Also, keep an eye out for us on Twitter. You can follow us at SplatterCast Pods, where we'll be posting all of our stuff. Luke is going to have some articles and some Tremors 2 content that he'll be dropping on there almost daily, he said, or
Well,
every
yeah,
other day or
I'm
so.
gonna try. I don't have, and I have a bunch of things saved, so I'm gonna decide on what's gonna be posted. The only thing I know for sure is I'm dressing Dylan up as a giant graboid on Friday and taking some photos. So
That's good. I like that. That's going to be fun. I will enjoy that. Because I
You'll feel like
love.
a mermaid.
I know it'll be a lot like Kevin Smith's Tusk, where I'm just gonna
Exactly.
be like making Shrieker and Tremors noises the whole time. I'm just gonna get really into my role.
There you
But
go.
yeah, if you can follow
We'll
us
do a
on
photo
there,
shoot.
you can keep up with us on, like I said, at SplatterCast Pod on Twitter. You can also find us, the audio only versions of us on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Music, Amazon Music, and anywhere your podcasts are found. We're pretty much on all of it. So, yeah, that about wraps us up here. So, I guess, Luke, any closing thoughts for the crew here?
Nope, nothing at all other than watch Tremors 2.
Watch Tremors
Even
2.
though we spoiled it.
We did spoil it, but it's still worth the watch. So,
There we go.
until then, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, we all go a little mad sometimes.